Hi, welcome to the WAVY Digital Desk. We're joined today with OCEARCH. We're on Shark Watch here. I know there's been some shark sightings locally. OCEARCH also just did an expedition northbound off North Carolina, so we can talk a little bit about that. But today we're going to get in deep to OCEARCH. They're tracking sharks globally. They're a global nonprofit organization and serve for research and education. We have Chief Scientist Dr. Bob Hueter here with us today. Dr. Hueter, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this, as I told you off screen, has been such a requested and exciting chat for everyone that knew this was coming up. So we're glad to finally have you in the studio today.
Well, thanks, Sarah. And I'm excited to be with you because the North Carolina area turns out to be very important for the shark population that we're working on. And coincidentally, all the shark scientists, most of the ones in the world, will be meeting in Norfolk in 2 weeks. So I look forward to being up there in a couple of weeks. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about our work.
Absolutely. For those that don't know, could you just give us a little information on what OCEARCH is? I mean, it is global. You guys do track sharks, but it's not just about tracking and pinging the sharks, correct? It's larger than that.
That's absolutely right. OCEARCH is a nonprofit organization. We're globally based. We have run, I think, about 45 expeditions around the world, starting back in the mid 2000s. And the purpose, our main mission, is to help collect the data that will help build the oceans back to abundance and ecological balance after many decades of overfishing and other problems. And the nice thing is we're winning this battle here on the East Coast of the United States, and we're trying to contribute to the same kinds of efforts around the world. So the expeditions that we run lately, the last 6 or 7 years, have been focused on the white shark of the Western North Atlantic. In other words, the white sharks that live along the U.S. and Canadian Atlantic coast. And we're known very well, of course, for our tagging and our tracking, because that's the part you can see on our website for free online and in our app. But every shark that we put our hands on, and right now we're up to 92 out of a total target of 100, every shark we put our hands on serves 24 or 25 different research projects, 42 investigators at 30 institutions, and the work runs everything from the tracking work to look at their movement patterns and their critical habitats, all the way down to genetics and even biomedicine. So we're taking blood, we're taking samples, we're taking measurements. We're doing things that no one else can do because they don't have anything like our ship, which has this special research platform that allows us to safely lift the animals up, give access to the science team, and then do our work, and then release the animals after about 15 minutes, healthy and able to resume their normal behavior. So it's a lot. It's much more than just tagging and tracking, but we love it when the public is following along with us, and sometimes the public can actually make suggestions about why the animals are doing what they're doing based on local knowledge. So that's OCEARCH in a nutshell, and we're coming to the end of this work, we think, in the Western North Atlantic, and looking for new adventures elsewhere.
And, why sharks? I mean, especially for some people that might view sharks as more of a scary animal, in the ocean. Why sharks? How important are they to the ecosystem?
Well, you shouldn't be scared of sharks. You should respect them and understand that they are wild animals. And but with the understanding that these animals have been around on this planet for 400 million years, they're survivors. They today comprise about 500 different species, and they're all very different from each other. So there's a lot of diversity in the shark group. But most of the sharks are what we call top predators, which means they kind of sit on the very top of the food web, And that role is very important in terms of controlling the balance of all the levels below. Because if you cut that level out, then everything kind of goes out of whack. There's not biological control of the next levels down, and pretty soon the ocean is out of balance. And this is in fact what's happened over the last 50 years as sharks have been overfished very dramatically in many places around the world, including in the United States. We have however, turned the corner in the US, and sharks are making a comeback now. And as they make this comeback, we're collecting the information necessary to not so much to protect them, but to conserve them, to make sure that any kind of take of sharks in fisheries or incidental take is sustainable, because we need those sharks there to restore ecological balance in the oceans. So that's why we focus on sharks, especially the white shark, which is the super top predator. But it's really just a kind of keystone species and a banner for all of marine research that we do, and the importance of having our oceans healthy and in balance, not only for the planet, but for ourselves.
And what were putting these white sharks at risk, or why is it so important to track that population?
Well, first of all, we want to rebuild the white shark because it was depleted around 75%, beginning around the 1960s through the early 1990s. And then about the mid 90s, management measures were put into effect to not only just protect the white shark, but also to rebuild shark populations that had been so decimated. And I'm talking about in US waters. And actually, Virginia was one of the first states, I think it might have been the first state, to have some limits on shark fishing in state waters. So Virginia's been a part of this for a long time, for at least, I would say, 30 years. Now that we know that the population's rebuilding, and it's not back yet, believe me, it's not close to where it once was, but it is on an upward trajectory. We want to map out all those areas where these animals go to understand where the critical places are for things like reproduction, feeding, growing, so that they're not, so that the gains that we've made aren't reversed by fishing in those areas. And also we want to know what other jurisdictions these sharks go to, because these are highly migratory species. They travel thousands of miles in a year. And one of the things that our research opened up right away was the importance of both Atlantic Canada and the Eastern Gulf of Mexico to this particular population. So we can protect them on the US coast, but if we don't work with our Canadian friends, or work even with authorities in Mexico and even in Cuba, where some of these sharks go, and other parts of the Caribbean, then again, all the measures that we take here might be negated in those other countries. So this is sort of the bigger picture of why we do this, to move the science to the policy level. And it has ramifications not just for white sharks, but for a variety of other species. Then beyond that, I mean, as a marine biologist myself, in this field for 40 years, I just think this is a fascinating case study of this amazing predator and this wonderful animal that is not as big a threat to humans as the books and movies have made them out to be.
I was going to say, I mean, some people probably use the shark tracker in some fashion to make sure, they're not in waters where sharks are, or they look at it out of fear. But, I guess per what you said, this exists to respect the animals, to help them thrive, to help the oceans.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's fine for people to use the tracker to understand the presence of the sharks that we've tagged, say, off their beaches. I mean, OCEARCH's motto is facts over fear. And when you have facts at your fingertips, then the fear goes down, because you know better about the situation and you know how to conduct yourself. So, for example, I mean, this summer at the beaches, we're already putting out some guidelines for safety tips, especially as we go next week into the 4th of July week. That's always a kind of a high point of a lot of people in the water, and the sharks and other marine animals being very active coastally. So knowledge is power, and knowing that the sharks are there, not necessarily white sharks, but other species, particularly in the Virginia area. There are certain things that you can do to be much safer and not put yourself at risk. And so using the tracker for that is fine. It's fine. Just I would just say don't get scared by it, but be empowered by it to know what's happening. But also remember that when you look at the tracker, uh, these locations of these sharks are coming in pretty close to real time. But by the time you would say you would go to that location, the shark would be long gone, because these animals don't sit in one place. They're moving around constantly. So um, understand that that's how that works.
Right. And I want to get to asking you about, how they ping and sort of the technology there. But I wanted to ask, in terms of what's happening, whether off the coast of North Carolina or even Virginia, I mean, do you know what sort of behaviors are happening now? Would it be unusual to see a shark at this point because they are heading up, as you said, to the northeast area, for the summer? I mean, what's happening right now?
Yeah, well, as far as the white sharks that we're studying now, that's only one of probably 24 species that live in the region, depending upon the time of year. Most of our white sharks have already begun to move north for their summer migration, their spring and summer migration, and they're heading up to New England. They're heading up to Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. More than half of them actually go to Canada, and these are places where they spend the summer feeding on very energy-rich sources of food, like seals, for example, the gray seal. You don't have seals in North Carolina except extremely rarely, so they're pretty much have moved on. There's a few stragglers, and there will be maybe a few that'll come by in the next month, but by the end of June and into the middle of July, they should all be pretty much farther north, up in the New England area. Now, what happens then is not because the white sharks have moved on, but more incidental to that, is that you will have movements of other species that will kind of come in as the water's warm and they're coming up from the south. There's a species called the blacktip shark, which in the past would probably stop certainly around Cape Hatteras, but it seems to be moving up farther into that region and maybe even beyond pretty more regularly. And that's no doubt a result of temperature change, with climate change, with ocean temperatures coming up, and also the rebuilding of the blacktip shark population, which has rebounded magnificently, is back to being sustainable. And then there's several other species. The blacktip shark is the one in Florida that is kind of the biter that bites surfers and swimmers on the East Coast. It's responsible for most of our couple of dozen bites per year here. Most of these bites are not too serious, but no shark bite is minor. They all have to be taken care of. On the other hand, then there are a couple of other species that are there in the summertime that are more of a concern. And one is the bull shark, which can actually come into brackish water and even almost into fresh water. That's a species to be careful around. And then tiger sharks are more of an oceanic species, but they will range in close to shore and occasionally be responsible for an incident. So these other species are there. Then there's probably a half a dozen others that are common, and you just have to assume that when you go into the water, that especially this time of year, not necessarily in the winter, but this time of year, that there are sharks in the area, and just be smart about how you use the ocean.
We have a specific ask here with one guest on Facebook. They said, have there been any more sightings from Mary Lee, and what did you all learn from her?
Oh, Mary Lee was one of the big females that we tagged way back in the beginning when we started our work in this part of the world in 2015, and she gave us a long data set that actually started to lay down the whole pattern for the adult females, which turns out to be probably the most interesting part of the white shark life cycle. But the tags that we put on these animals, as far as the fin tag, the one you can see on the tracker, they have battery lives of about 5 years. So Mary Lee's, the fact that you don't see Mary Lee on the tracker anymore giving new locations is says absolutely nothing about her own situation. She's probably just fine and still swimming around and probably producing pups every couple of years or every 3 years. We're not sure about that, but that's part of what we're still working on. But sometimes some of these sharks, for whatever reason, their tags are lasting longer. We have a shark named Miss Costa right now, who was a little bit quiet last year, but then all of a sudden this winter started pinging again, and she's now given us more than 6.5 years of data. And it's through these long-term data sets that we're able to figure out the patterns, because they're very complicated. I will mention Mary Lee has another kind of tag inside of her called an acoustic tag, which you don't see on the tracker. But when these animals come into range for an underwater receiver, which there are hundreds, if not thousands, along the U.S. Atlantic coast, and they pick up the ping that comes from that sort of lipstick-sized transmitter inside of her body cavity, then we get information about where Mary Lee is. And I haven't seen anything lately, so I don't have anything to tell you about that. But we can sometimes get data from those animals with those acoustic pingers for 10 years or more.
And so the one that's external, I mean, how does the tracking work on that, and how are you getting that data?
Yeah, so we actually use 3 different kinds of tags. I just mentioned the acoustic tag that's inside of the animal that's unique to each individual. Then we sometimes put a what's called a pop-up archival tag that's attached to the outside of the animal that collects data for about a year and then releases and comes to the surface and sends data. So that's sort of after the fact. But the one that you see on the tracker is called a spot tag, SPOT, for smart position or temperature transmitting tag. And this is a device that we bolt to the first dorsal fin, and it doesn't bother the animal at all. The animals don't show any sign of even feeling it when we attach the tags. Tags are designed to come off the animals after their lives are expended. So the tags' lives are expended. So about 5 years or so. And these tags transmit data to us in real time via overhead satellites. Now, the only way they can do that, they can't do it through water because they use radio frequencies to transmit the data. It's kind of like a GPS unit, although it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. But the tag has to be in the air. And so we only get information from these tags when these sharks come to the surface and their dorsal fin sticks out, at least a little bit, for 10 or 20 seconds or more. Understand that sharks aren't air breathers, so they don't have to do that. And there's a lot of sharks that you don't get any good spot data from, a lot of species, and sometimes a lot of individuals. But with the white shark, they do come to the surface enough that we get plenty of good data from these spot tags. So sometimes there's big gaps, there's big jumps from one location to another. And that's primarily because the animal has been under the surface, perhaps even very deep during that period of time.
And for people that aren't familiar, with the software, I just want to pull it up on screen real quick so people can see, what exactly it's showing. Where we are on the shark tracker is we're going to be showing obviously right in our region right here. We can zoom in a little bit, but what's pinging really is up here in the Northeast right now. So is that saying that those sharks have, come up, to the surface, or what is that suggesting, that over here where we are, we're not really seeing any of those live sort of radiuses, coming out?
Right. Right. So this is on the website. This is at ocearch.org, and you can also pull this up on your smartphone at just Global Shark Tracker. It's a free app for both Apple and Android phones. And if Sarah, if you were to apply the filter, and there are filters that can be applied, but I wouldn't suggest doing it now because it might be messy. But if you were to apply a filter, say for just show me the pings for the last month, you would see that there would just be a cluster of locations up in that Northeast area, up in that New England area, in the Gulf of Maine, and as far north as Nova Scotia now. That is because the animals have moved up there. That's where they are. It's not that they're sitting deep down south, with the exception of maybe, as I said before, a few stragglers that are kind of pulling up the rear. But most of the animals are going to be up in that sort of Massachusetts, Gulf of Maine, Nova Scotia area as far as the live pings.
And, if we go down here too, just so people know, which is a really cool feature, is you can also see where the sharks have pinged in the past, right? So it keeps a log, and that way I think, I'll just click on this first one as an example, but it does show you these really interesting, lines are those between pings of where the shark came up, and you all are tracking, their movements and such? Because some do actually show more movement, throughout the whole East Coast.
Right. So the computer just draws a straight line between consecutive pings, but pings might be they certainly would be hours apart, at times days apart. Sometimes they're months apart. So you pulled up looks like you pulled up a shark.
This took us all the way off the coast of Australia.
But I think go back to the other screen and try to click on one that was right off the North Carolina coast, and that should show.
We'll close the track down there.
That should show one that's more relevant to the folks in the region.
But hey, that's a good example of, there are sharks being tracked all over the world, which
right. Yeah, we're not just doing this here. We have collaborators all over the world that either contribute their tracks to the tracker so that the public can see, or these are from expeditions that OCEARCH has run in places like South Africa, Australia.
This one is from December 2022. Ferg. Is this one, or Ferg?
Ferg, yeah. Yeah, Ferg was one that we tagged. I believe, I can't read the screen there. It's real small on my display.
But here. I'll put it full just so people can see here.
Yeah. So you see his, the movements of this animal all the way, up and down the coast. And yeah.
Here, I'll put it back.
So you see, and then on the right there's some basic data on when the animals were tagged, their most recent ping, even shows, how many miles that, as far as the crow flies, how many miles, minimum miles that they've traveled so far. And like I said, these animals will travel, thousands of miles every year as they go back and forth. But Ferg is showing right there the overall range of this population from Nova Scotia in the summertime. Some of these animals go even farther north than that, up to Newfoundland and over to the Grand Banks. And if you scroll down to the lower end, okay, so you see Ferg's got a ping there in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, just north of Key West. Now you notice how the computer draws the lines across Florida. No, Ferg did not take the interstate across Florida to get back and forth, but that's because we didn't hear from FERG as it was making that run around. But this eastern Gulf of Mexico area turns out to be very important to at least half of the animals that we've tagged as a winter feeding ground. But then in the middle is this very critical part of the southeast U.S., especially the Outer Banks and just south of the Outer Banks. It's a place where we have been successful at catching the animals in both the spring and the fall, as they spend time there, those two places, or they're moving through on their two migratory runs, north or south. And one of the things that we're trying to confirm at the end here, at the end of our study, is where these animals are mating. We know where the females are giving birth, essentially, which is up off of the northeast. But we think they may be mating in the springtime off of the Carolina coast. Now, probably out off the coast, not too close to the coast. And so getting out to them has been difficult, finding that and confirming that. We've got some indirect evidence that might be happening, and that's the hypothesis we're working with right now.
And more of a fun question for you said about 92 sharks you've tracked. I mean, how do you come up with the names? I mean, I've heard, comments that it might be named after someone's mom or something like that, but that was a viewer question that we had. How are they named? Are they just named, one at a time, as you pin them? Or is there a list that is, kept somewhere?
There's no secret list in a lockbox or anything like that. We do name them. Of course, we have to know that, what sex they are, and we really try to pay attention to the local area. For example, we have a shark Crystal that was named after the Crystal Coast there along the Carolina coast. In the end, though, most of the names are selected by our sponsors, our corporate partners, and so on. That's part of the perk that they get for helping us do our work. Sometimes we do name sharks after people. Mary Lee was named for the mom of Chris Fisher, who's our founder and expedition leader, and obviously a very dear name for him. And I have to say, I was humbled when 2 years ago or so I was on an expedition and they told me they were going to name a shark Bob, and so Bob was tagged in Nova Scotia, and he's laid down a pretty decent track, but he doesn't come up very often. He's really aggravating. He's kind of like me, but he's giving us what are called Z pings, which are transmissions that don't have enough time to give us a location. So we know Bob's fine, but he just doesn't sit at the surface and bob around too often. He probably shouldn't be named Bob because of that. But so that's how we pick the names. There's a lot of thought put into it, and especially when we can name it after the region where the shark is caught. Like Hilton, for example, was a very memorable large shark that we caught off of Hilton Head, and he's turned out to be a very interesting example of a mature male. So when we name it after the local area, it really helps to recall where that animal was originally caught.
And is, user interaction part of this? So getting people to actually, get on your website, see what the sharks are doing. Do you want them, is there a way for people to, comment or message in as they see sharks that maybe aren't pinged that are, in their area? Is that of interest to you all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And believe me, OCEARCH participates in every form of social media known to man and woman. It's way beyond my pay grade to handle all of that. But Facebook, for example, is about all I can muster. There's all kinds of ways to interact and send us ideas and ask questions. Now we have a tremendous following. I mean, literally millions. So not all the questions, we can't answer every one, but we try to get to the issues that are the important ones. And every once in a while we have something like this where we have like a live Facebook or or some kind of social media um, outreach program, so we can talk with people and answer questions on the chat. But as I mentioned before, it's been interesting. Sometimes people have some pretty good ideas to help us understand why animals are doing what they do, because when you think about it, all the tags show us where they're going and when, but they don't answer why. And we can only answer those questions by pulling together a variety of data sources and talking with locals, because the local fishermen, the local people who use the water sometimes know things that they don't realize are very beneficial for us understanding why the animals are there, such as right now there's a big herring run out here, or the seals are here, or something like that. So yeah, we're happy to, we really want people to follow us and to participate as citizen scientists.
And last thing I wanted to ask, I mean, you almost reached the goal of 100 sharks. So what's next? I mean, is there an area of focus that you all are looking into that you can say, or is there another project that's coming down the line?
Well, we're not going to just leave this area, because we're actually now building a brand new a brand new center for OCEARCH, a global center in North Florida, in the Jacksonville area, and that's where the ship is going to be. It's going to be the home for the ship. So we will always have a presence here. But as we get to our 100th shark in this study, there will be other things that we will want to do here, but we're really looking to go to other places that need our help to solve questions about the status of sharks in those places. And the one that we're really looking at right now is the Mediterranean and Northwest Europe. So next year, after our, we think, last expedition on this coast for now, we are hoping to move the ship across to Scotland and Ireland and England and look for the white shark there, which is a place that we have very little data on these sharks being there, but we have some reason to think they might be. And then work our way down into the Mediterranean and have the ship work in the Med for a period of time.
Well, Dr. Hueter, thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and explaining the tracker, and also, the East Coast, expedition and project that you all have been working on. So last thing I actually want to ask is, when do you plan to reach that 100 sharks? Is that really by the end of this year? Is that something that's going to take another year, to find, or?
We have another expedition that's happening after Thanksgiving off of the Carolina coast and in the Outer Banks area. We have 8 animals to go. If we get all 8 animals in that expedition, we'll be thrilled, but not necessarily counting on it. So then we'll have another expedition in the same region next spring in 2024, and then after that we'll start moving north. Remains to be seen if we're going to make a stop in Canada and do some last work there. But by July, August, we hope to be over in the UK and starting the work over there on the other side of the pond.
Great. So, I mean, for anyone listening and that, tracks these sharks and is watching, you will now get to, move to other sharks and new shark names, hopefully in the next year or two. So, Dr. Hueter, thank you so much. I mean, is there anything else that you want to end with, or that you want to share as you want people to be participating with you all and interacting?
Just, we're so grateful to all the people that follow us. We're doing this for you. We're not doing it just for ourselves, just to write our papers and that sort of thing. But we're doing it for our future generations, for you and your kids and your grandkids, to try to bring the sharks back. So we thank you for that, for following us and supporting us. We really thank you for your support, because OCEARCH is a nonprofit organization. It's very expensive to run our ship, very expensive. We don't charge anything to the scientists who participate in this, and we really rely on philanthropy and corporate support. So thank you for that. Every bit of help keeps us going and keeps our dream alive.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Hueter, and thank you to everyone that tuned in. If you're watching this later, more information will be available on wavy.com as well with the OCEARCH link and more, so you can find the tracker and more information on the website. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Great talking with you.
Thank you too.